We're back working on the ute this episode. We've got tons to do, so let's get into it. The ute is heading into the panel beater soon to get a little bit of panel work done. So I have to get the car ready for him. Now it's not going in for final paint or anything. It's just going in to get the sills fixed, and he's going to de-skin the roof and fix that. And potentially paint the underneath and the engine bay, but they might have to wait till next time because I have to do some cutting and grinding and welding in the engine bay in order to fit the front suspension. And I can't do the front suspension without the front diff, which is actually on its way. Regardless if it's getting painted this time or next time, I still want to pull the guards off, pull the whole grille off and everything on that and the bonnet. So even if he doesn't paint it, when it comes back, it's ready for me to do the front suspension. We're also throwing a body lift in this, and I'll get into why I'm doing that soon. I've also just got to pull the front suspension out, so springs, shocks. There's an adjustable pan nut in here. I chuck it on Marketplace, try and make some cash, because this thing certainly chews up a lot of that. We've also got to finish off these rear shock mounts, so it's 95% done, but I just wanted to make up a res mount for the 2 remote res. So I've drawn something up, so of course we're going to get the plasma table out and cut a bit of stuff out, and it'll also brace these shock towers as well. And then what the idea is, the whole back plate that mounts everything and braces the shock towers will offer a guide as to the angle and the position of the shock mount, so it's easier to install for anyone else. And there's a whole heap of other little random jobs that we have to do. So the idea is, when I get it back from the panel beaters, I want to start on the rear hoop, the roof exo cage looking thing, and the front suspension mounts and all the cool stuff up that end. And I also need to get this off the hoist because my other car urgently needs it. Enough talking, we'll get the spanners out, start undoing the front end. Well, I thought I'd be able to get the guard off. There's 2 bolts and you got to get them from between the door hinge and the pillar, and I can't get it because the door won't open because of the hoist post. So before I take it off the hoist, I did want to finish this back end so I can put the tyres on and roll it around. So what we'll do now is I'll cut out this shock tower brace res mount thing and finalise the whole kit. I'll weld it all out, weld the bump stops in and everything, and then I can throw some wheels on it, roll it out, pull the guards off, and then we'll do the body lift after that. We'll fire up the plasma cutter. Well, that's all done and looking good. I did have to play around with the angles of each one a little bit before I welded the mount on, and that was just so I didn't have any fouling, so the end of each res into the opposite side hose down here and in this area here. And I also had to play around a little bit to make sure there was no fouling on the crossover here. One of the mounts is an extra 30mm set out over the other side, so that's obviously because you can't have them the same distance, they'll foul directly in the middle, but it all looks fine. There's no fouling anywhere. They're just hose clamped on, and when you buy these shocks specifically, and I'm pretty sure others come with it anyway, they have a rubber base mount like a half moon, so that's sitting under the res with the hose clamp on it, so they're rubber mounted, so they're not super solid. The shocks can move left and right pretty easy. They can still twist. Like obviously you don't want to pull these that tight that it binds up the shock one way, so it's always sort of forced to operate, you know, bound up. But that's not the case here. Everything's nice. So I've offset this backing plate to the inside of the mount here, and that's because I did mention it in the other episode. I want to put maybe a water tank here. I did actually look up and see you could get custom made poly tanks, which is probably what I'd do. But pretty much a tank's going to follow this angle to the top of the mounts here, across and down, and then out to the face of the coil brace here. So it'd be a square edge up and across and then angled at the ends. I did calculate this to be about 32 litres, give or take. So that'd be good to have that much water on board all the time. I'll just have a little hole in the tray up the top here, and then, yeah, so I'll just fill it up from the outside. So at least you got drinking water, hand washing water, whatever you need. Pretty much anywhere you go, you don't have to throw on like a jerry can or anything. But for the further trips, I'll make room on the tray for a couple of jerrys if I have to. And then I'm still liking the idea of having 3 batteries end for end across the face here. So they'll sit in here somewhere. I'll make a tray up. And then that will all be contained in the wheel arch from the tyres. That'll hopefully come through all the same. So it'll just be a full arc through the center of the tray, and I'll make the panels quickly unbolt, so it's only a matter of unbolting the panel and I can get to the tank or the batteries, or unbolt the backside, I can get to the remote res and the shocks and everything. The most annoying thing with a tray is not having anything accessible underneath, so that's something I'll definitely keep in mind. Now that that's all done, I'm just going to pull the shocks out, pull the bump stops out, and then I'll get some wheels on it. I can take it off the hoist, finish pulling the guards off, and then we'll smack this body lift in. Well, the rear is all done and dusted. That's finished, all welded out and ready to go. I've pulled both the guards off. I was going to pull the bonnet off, but I think I'll leave it on. Now, like I said, I was going to get into paint the engine bay and that while it's there, but I'm not far enough along to cut out the inner guards for the suspension that's going in it. So I'll just have to take it back there another day once I've finished playing around in the engine bay here. But the guards can stay off it because, yeah, I need to get in there anyway for the suspension. So fun little fact, the ute cabs are the only ones that are braced up to the radiator support panel. So this whole channel here isn't actually on a wagon, and neither is this brace here. So wagons just have like this part here and it finishes somewhere here. And it's super common for them to crack the battery tray out. So they usually crack behind the battery tray and they start behind the guard and crack all the way down, and you don't see it until it's all the way down here if you still got the plastic inner guard. And by the time it's cracked to underneath the battery tray, like it's a major to fix. Years ago, I did actually have a kit made up that had a triangle brace in here and a channel brace along here. I think I might bring that back because if you've got a wagon or whatever and you've got a heavy battery or whatever, it's just nice to have a bit of extra bracing. And I do actually brace the bottom of the inner guard as well, which I'll show you in a later episode. But pretty much I just feed a bit of round bar around it all to stop it cracking. I learned that off my cousin. I'll quickly chuck in this body lift as well. The state of the car makes it pretty easy to throw one in. I'm not particularly a fan of body lifts. Yeah, they're not really what I like to do. But I am doing this because I want the car super low on the bump stops, and that means I need more room for the tyres. So the tyres will actually rub on the inner guard, especially the firewall. So if you lift the body up a little bit, it can help that situation. And it also is going to help with are the suspension towers in the engine bay. So the higher the body, the sort of less they come through the engine bay, which leaves me a bit more room for like an airbox or whatever else. So I am going only 1 inch with the body lift, and it's pretty much as high as I'd really like to go. I don't really want to go any higher than 2 inch. I think 2 inch makes it look bad, like the cab is too far away from the chassis, and also you run into more problems. So when you do a body lift, things like your brake line that are mounted to the body and then mounted to the chassis, your steering column, which goes from the body to the chassis, things like your radiator hoses, which go from your body to the motor, and all sorts of other stuff that connects between the two. It all becomes a little bit of an issue, especially if you've got an engine fan as well. So lifting the body up, essentially the fan is lower on the radiator. So if you have like a bottom shroud, it's pretty common for you to have to take the bottom shroud off, especially with a 2 inch. And then in the cab as well, usually like your low range stick, if you do a 2 inch lift and you go to pull it into low range, the stick will hit the surround as well. So you have to notch that out sometimes. And if your car's complete, it's just an all-round pain in the ass job, especially in the back of a wagon. Like the back two bolts are actually from the outside in, and the nuts are in a captive frame in the floor. And from factory, they have Loctite on the nuts. And if you don't heat the nut up or the bolt a substantial amount in the floor there, if you just go straight up and try and ugga-dugga the bolt out from the bottom, it usually rounds out the captive area, and then you can't undo the bolt, and it is an absolute nightmare to get it out. But we don't have that problem in a ute, and also the car's already in bits, so it should only really be like a 20-minute job to throw this in. Now these body lift blocks kind of a rip-off, and they're too small. So these are like 60 mil OD, I think they were. So these will only be temporary blocks. What I'm going to do at some stage, probably when I blast the chassis, is put all new body mounts in it, and then I'll buy some more body blocks the same OD as the factory body mount. So I think it's 75 mil. The idea is you don't want to put the load of the cab on a smaller surface area, because it does crack the floor out, and I've seen it before. I've seen people put little body mounts in and then they punch through the floor and crack it all out, and then it's a major job to repair. So ideally you want the biggest OD you can, which is about 75 mil. And these are just like a poly hard plastic material, plenty good enough. You don't specifically need alloy blocks. I think these are plenty good enough. And then you don't get any form of wearing between the alloy and the floor of the car. Like these, will have no effect on the steel. Essentially the steel will wear that out first, which won't happen anyway. So for body mounts, there's two at the front here, and they're accessed through there. And then you've got on a ute cab, there's a body mount there and a body mount there, which is accessed through there. And then one, you have to undo the seat belt, if you can see that, just there. And what I'm gonna do is undo all the bolts, push it back a little bit, and then just lift the cab up with the hoist, slip the blocks in, put the bolts in, lower it back down, and then do it back up. It's really not that big of a job when your car's like this. It's such a P-plater mod, but anyway, let's get into it. Well, that took a whole of 20 odd minutes. So like I said, it's super easy when everything's apart. If everything's together, it's a bit more of a process, a few hours. Also, how good is the shock tune? I've seen plenty of cars ride like this, The bouncy brains out your ears, I reckon. So that wraps up this video. I don't know how long it's going to be at the panel beaters. It shouldn't be too long, couple of weeks maybe. Now that the jobs list has been trimmed up a little bit for now, yeah, you should smash it out pretty quickly. You probably won't see this car on the channel for a little bit though. I've got a wagon video coming up, and then we've got Queen's birthday coming up. So there'll be a couple videos in that. And then I've got some work to do on the race car, and we've got to go out and do some more driving. So don't expect to see this for a couple of months, but when we come back to this, we are doing some cool stuff. So the front suspension setup and front diff setup, which is going to be really cool. And then we've got the whole roof bar set up, everything. We've got all sorts going on there. So both of them are going to be, yeah, pretty bloody awesome. If you did enjoy this one, don't forget to go down and drop a like and a comment. That helps out a lot. We've got lots coming up, so stay tuned and I'll see you then.